Give me big old buckets of butter beer. Give me big old barrels of butter beer. Give me the drink I love so dear. And another round for my friend right here of the sweet old butter beer.
Welcome to the Three Broomsticks. We invite you to pull up a chair, grab a butter beer, and settle in for a hearty discussion about everyone's favorite wizard boy and company, Harry James Potter. I'm Sam Williams.
I'm Sophia Jenkins.
And I'm Sierra Obermark. And today we have with us a returning guest, Matthew.
Woo! Welcome.
Woo, 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 woo. Hello and welcome, Matthew. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Would you care to refresh our listeners on your Hogwarts house and your favorite book and character? You don't have to go through your whole journey if you want to just direct them to previous episodes. Or you can feel free.
I'm kind of like the ghoul in the Three Broomsticks attic. I've just sort of been here the whole time. I'm mostly not a trouble. You can usually ignore me reasonably easily. But if you've ever seen a weirdo called Absent-Minded Raven in the comments section, that's probably me.
Oh, just indeed. Probably.
No promises. I'm a Ravenclaw with puff tendencies, which means I occasionally look up from a book long enough to go, hi.
I love it.
Matthew, do you want to do your fave book and character, or do you just want to do your Hogwarts house?
I've said it before. Go back and look at old episodes, whatever it was.
Sweet. Please refer to other episodes for Matthew's whole lineage of Harry Potterness.
I think the first one I was on was episode 6. I can't remember what the number of the other one was. About 20-something.
People just have to listen to all of them, and then they'll find you.
Yeah.
There you
That'd
go.
be great.
Yeah. So I'm more like the Where's Waldo of the Three Broomsticks then.
For today's episode, we have number 52. We've gathered to discuss wizarding portraits. Our recommended reading would be the books and a little tiny J.K. Rowling supplemental material, which there were 3 little online books created a while ago, and the one with Hogwarts portraits in it is an incomplete and unreliable guide, which was by the Pottermore Presents crew, where they have a little tiny tidbit on Hogwarts portraits and wizarding portraits. So you can check that out on ebook only.
And a huge thanks to Lori Young.
Thank you, Lori.
Over on our Patreon. Woo, woo, woo.
Yeah.
Who bought us this round of drinks.
Yes, excellent. Thank you, Lori. We appreciate it.
Thank you. If you, dear listener, would like to buy us around at the pub, head over to patreon.com/3 broomsticks. That's with the numeral 3 to sign up. We are offering bonus content, chats with the hosts, on-episode shout-outs for our patrons. We also have, that bonus content is constantly growing. We have lots of great stuff out there, so we would really appreciate your help keeping the lights on at the Three Broomsticks so we can keep talking about Harry Potter for a long time to come, and we can share more of our infinite wisdom, so we think, with you. We think we're very wise.
Indeed.
Debatable.
All of us are Ravenclaws. None of us are Ravenclaw. I mean, Gryffindors.
None of us are literally
Hufflepuffs.
Anything else.
Yep, nothing.
And let us also offer up a toast to the comments on episode 49. That episode was our strike crossover episode focusing on main character parallels. We raise our glass to commenter. Can anybody possibly guess? Absent-Minded Raven. This is a quiz, guys. Who did we just say that was? Who said, I like the insight from Lori Kim's
Sierra.
HP. Should we have him read his own comment?
Since we have him with us, why don't we have him read his own comment?
So I shall take up a dramatic voice.
Yes.
Fantastic.
I appreciate the insight from Laurie Kim's Harry Potter After 2020 that Hagrid is a transitional figure. He is always guiding or carrying Harry to new places, to the Dursleys, to Diagon Alley, to Hogwarts, etc. Is there anyone who fills a similar role in the CB Strike series?
Nice. Well read, sir.
That was fantastic. That is a voice that needs to be on more audio mediums.
I'm slowly getting the hang of talking into a microphone.
That is such an interesting question. I'm like, is there anyone who fills that role?
Do you want time to think? Because Irvin wrote a response that Sierra put in the doc. We could read that out while you think if you wanted.
Yeah. Go for it. That sounds great.
Okay. Irvin responded in the comment section to Absent-Minded Raven. I think to the extent that we have someone taking the protagonist to new places, it's Strike doing that for Robin. At least as far as the whole, quote, world of detective-ing, unquote, goes. But because of the more episodic nature of the Strike books, it's usually their client who brings them into whatever world they're entering for the book.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. I think that is true, that it is a different style of book. So I don't think it's quite the same. But one thing that came to my mind, and it's really just, one moment that I'm thinking of here is Strike's friend Shanker, who does literally drive him in a very dramatic scene. And I won't do any spoilers, but it is a scene that I think of as something that is sort of bringing him into a new world or a new understanding of himself. So that was one possibility I thought of. But I agree with Strike that it's not really that there's one consistent character throughout.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
I do like, just in general, the Hagrid as a transitional figure. Because that is, it's true at the beginning, but it also comes to that full circle at the end as well, into kind of a almost life after death situation, or however you kind of want to look at that. Yeah. But it always seems to be Hagrid bringing him into something new, even if it's something as simple as, dangerous creatures can still have positives, or, he guides them into the Forbidden Forest to talk to Aragog, and he brings them into the world of the giants that they don't know anything about, that Harry doesn't know anything about ahead of time. And there's just in a number of circumstances on a smaller scale as well, he's bringing new information forward. And part of that is also Hagrid's loose lips, but it's still he frequently moves the plot forward by guiding them somewhere, intentionally or unintentionally.
Well, and even Hagrid does it sort of symbolically, right? He's the one that leads them up to the castle to go to the Yule Ball, right? Transitioning or showing this sort of move into more teenageriness. He's the one who brings Harry to his first funeral, which is the Aragog funeral, before we get to Dumbledore's funeral.
Right.
He, as you said, in terms of life and death, he's the one that carries Harry back to Hogwarts when Harry's supposed to be the dead body. So he really seems like a transitional figure, not just from a literal standpoint of here's a new location throughout all of Sorcerer's Stone, but also to these bigger moments in life.
Can you clarify what you meant by the Yule Ball part?
So they're down at the cabin, and he's going to walk them up during sort of the Christmas celebration. He doesn't actually walk them to the U-Ball, but he's the one that has the odor cologne on and puts on the suit and is showing Harry, who doesn't really have a father figure, sort of this weird father figure moment of this is what you do for a girl, Harry. And then he ends up walking with Madame Maxine up to the castle instead of the crew.
I don't think that's
Right.
at the Yule Ball. I think that's when they're going to the... sorry. I think that's
When they're meeting the dragons.
the feast where they are choosing the names for the Goblet of Fire.
Oh, okay, my bad.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure. But still, I think the point still stands that this is like a moment where Harry then, like, you know, Hagrid doesn't know that, but is going to have to step up and, you know, take on this responsibility that's bigger than his age. And yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much for that comic. That was a nice little tie-in with
The Strike series.
Obviously, Sam and I don't know too much about Strike.
Nope.
But, but that was a nice little comparison there. So let us dive into our main discussion. We all prepared and ready for that one?
Indeed.
Let's do it. I thought we'd start with kind of just like the basic definition of the portraits that we get in our material. I've kind of abridged it, so it's not a direct quote, but Hogwarts portraits, and we are assuming this goes for the rest of them. The definition specifies Hogwarts portraits, but I'm going to say portraits in the wizarding world. They can talk and they can move. They behave like the subject of the portrait as the painter saw them, which I think is interesting. And then another interesting part is that the skill of the painter doesn't necessarily matter, but the power of the depicted does, in terms of the degree with which the depicted can interact with viewers. Which is fascinating. I think both of those 2 points are really interesting, that it's not how the subject of the portrait actually was, but it's how they were seen by the painter themselves. But then the painter kind of doesn't, I mean, obviously the skill is how accurate a physical representation would be. But the painter themselves doesn't have to have the great magical talent in order to create a portrait that's really interacting with others. But how powerful the witch or wizard was, that impacts it. So I didn't even put this in the doc, but now I'm thinking, is it that when they die, their magic like goes into the portrait somehow, like at least like a residual amount? Could that be?
I don't know if that could be, especially, I mean, I think we're going to talk a lot about hot chocolate cards. My God. Chocolate frog cards.
I got really confused for a moment. I was like, I didn't prepare anything about hot chocolate.
Hot chocolate frogs, you know? No, the chocolate frogs, although now I really want there to be in the Harry Potter world, chocolate frogs that turn into hot cocoa. That'd be great. Anywho, so
you just slowly boil them.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
And they don't think to jump out of the glass.
Yeah. Well, I have these like they're like Bev bombs or whatever, and it's this little chocolate ball that you drop into, and then you pour hot water over it, and then it like opens and the marshmallows come out and like melts into it. So I feel like you could definitely do a magical version of that.
Chocolate
easy.
experience.
Oh, you could definitely do that. Yeah.
That would be great. Except as long as the marshmallows and stuff don't look like the little innards of an actual frog.
Oh, come on.
Anyways, back.
That's ruined it for everyone.
Well, we're 10 minutes in.
I'm not ending the
Sam's
podcast
ruined it
again
already.
early, I promise. I did that on the first holiday episode. It's fine. Okay, so back to your original point. I don't think that the residual magic goes in. There seems to be something in the enchantments, and it doesn't even really seem to be the actual power of the person, but the power of their personality almost. Because as your question here about Sir Cadogan goes, Sierra.
Oh, yes. Because that led me down a whole rabbit hole of how powerful was Sir Cadogan. And then I said, I think he's still a caricature of his original person. I mean, I'm kind of hoping that that's not how he actually was, but...
What Rowling writes in that little supplemental material about Sir Cadogan is that portraits can, quote, use some of their subjects' favorite phrases and imitate their general demeanor. Thus, Sir Cadogan's portrait is forever challenging people to a fight, falling off its horse and behaving in an unfairly balanced way, which is how the subject appeared to the poor wizard who had to paint him. So, who knows if Sir Cadogan was actually like a pretty stand-up dude that just got one dragon ball of fire to the face too many times and became sort of idiotic and buffoonery.
Potentially.
Or if the painter just really didn't like Sir Cadogan and thought he was an absolute fool, even though he wasn't, because they disagreed on such and such political mess or, land dispute or whatever, and so painted him in an unfair way.
Right.
I mean, that happens in our world as well with
True.
portraiture or someone taking a photograph of a person. It's the way it's framed, the way it's staged.
Yeah.
You can convey a vibe of that person, which isn't necessarily what they would choose for themselves, but it is how the artist, the photographer, chooses to depict them. And I imagine this is like an extension of the same sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
True.
The artist is sort of getting the vibe of the person they're painting.
Right.
Yeah, I was gonna bring this up later, but I think this is a good time for me to pose my question of Walburga Black.
Yep.
Sorry.
So her whole everything is just like yelling and shouting and cursing.
Filch Mudbloods, we hate them, we hate them, we hate them forever.
That's it. That's the one.
Exactly. So I have to wonder, the painter, did they paint her as such because they agreed with what she was saying and wanted that to be out there? Or did they just think that she was a crazy loon and forever painted her as someone who would just scream her head off all the time and irrational, basically?
Right.
I almost feel like it's the latter, but I could see either side. And so that was just a really interesting thought process for me.
It's the satire paradox. That's proper satire. You can't tell the difference between whether is it making fun of this thing or is it genuinely expressing that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is a really interesting question for me because it's to me okay, if you think about being a wizarding painter as a job, then in order to be successful, it has to come down a lot to your reputation. So you have to have a reputation of painting someone in the way that they want to be seen. Because if people are going to pay for that, they are not going to pay for it if they meet you and get the sense that you're judging them or that you're they want to get the sense that you like them and will paint them in a flattering way. So I would imagine that either painters are really good at just winning over anyone they meet, or they there might be in the pureblood circuit a painter that they know is sympathetic to their views, who goes around to all of the fancy pureblood homes and paints their portraits. I don't think they're going to hire someone who is not sympathetic.
Fair point. And they obviously liked it enough to hang it up in the entranceway, so it's not like they hid it away in the attic or something.
Right. I mean, we don't know who hung it up. It very well could have been Creature and his permanent sticking charm. No, I think they specify that it's hers. That she don't they? Doesn't Sirius at one point mention that Walburga stuck her own did the permanent sticking charm to her own portrait?
Can't remember if they say specifically that it was hers, but I think that this is exactly how she wanted to be portrayed. I think that she would, the real Walburga would have hated to have Muggleborns and whoever the Order of the Phoenix in her house. So I think if you'd asked her before she died, would you like your portrait to scream at these people and make it impossible for them to stay in this place? She would have been like, oh yeah, definitely. That's definitely what my portrait should do. So
phrased it as, would you like your portrait to be fiercely protective of the House of Black?
exactly.
Yeah.
And she would have said, yes, 100%. Like, don't let any filth in here. Yeah.
So then that leads me to another idea of what is she like when there aren't all those people that she doesn't like in her house? Is she like actually a reasonable person and like you can just talk to her? If you are like, creature or somebody who aligns with her views and you don't have the distraction of having all these like unwanted people in the home.
Yeah.
She must behave completely differently.
I mean, we do get the sense that, Sirius says, like, oh, Creature has just been, like, taking mad orders from my mother's portrait. And, that's Sirius's perspective, that these are, like, crazy orders. But, like, I think for Creature, he's been alone in this house for so long. Yeah, I'm sure that he does, just, like, have conversations with her. And also, like, okay, he's always, like, muttering to himself. Like, I wonder if he's used to, like, her following him around to different portraits and, like, chatting with it. Like, or maybe he just, like, chats to all of the portraits in the House of Black as he wanders around. Like, maybe he's usually not muttering to himself. He's muttering to the other portraits. Like, maybe.
Well, and is that, like, a contributing factor in him, like, seeming a little off? Because I know there's, additional material that which it's also mentioned earlier, but like portraits are not the person.
Yeah.
So like you don't want to kind of convince yourself that you're actually talking to the person.
Yeah.
But if he has nobody else to talk to and he has like essentially convinced himself that these are people, then like it could be why he's maybe like a little off his rocker.
Yeah.
Because I can imagine they're probably repeating the same conversations.
Right.
At some point. Because while the portraits are like, it's like not like he has any like new things to discuss with them. So it's probably a lot of the same type of conversation over and over and over.
And he's probably not used to having any consequences. Like, I think we see that when the order is there, that he's like muttering these things to himself and that like people can actually like get mad at him about it and like punish him for it or whatever. And when he's just with the portraits, if he says something the portraits doesn't like they can't do anything about it. Like, or like, he can just leave the room. He can just, like, I don't think he's used to having like real live people in that space that he has to deal with.
That's probably very true. Yeah.
Oh, that's so interesting. Well, one day, creature episode. Get so deep into that because he is very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I do wonder with Walburga Black's portrait if we talk a little bit about training later on in terms of there are portraits where you have it painted during life and then you train that portrait. You go and speak to him and try to impart knowledge. And I do wonder if Walburga Black's portrait is the creation of her having her own therapy sessions with herself. Where she would get really, really mad.
Canon accepted, yes.
And then she would go, and because her husband doesn't listen to her, and her son won't listen to her, and her other son's dead, or whatever, that she then goes and runs and screams everything to her own portrait, which is why we get the result of her just being an awful little curmudgeon there.
That's really funny.
It makes so much sense.
I like it. Yep.
Yeah.
And that's why there's the permanent sticking charm.
Yep.
So that she didn't have to move it around.
And she's always shouting because it's when she's doing stuff in the kitchen and it can hear her from the hallway.
Oh my God.
Excellent.
I mean, this also brings up the question to me of like, okay, if wizarding portraits are, the way that the artist is imagining it. And, like, you can make them move, you can make, they'll do all of these different things. I guess one question I have is, like, are there any laws about, like, making portraits of people without their consent? Like, because,
interesting.
Like, if it could be, like, a sort of libel type idea of, like, if the way you're portraying someone in a portrait is extremely biased, or the things that you put them in a portrait with a couple of other people who they don't get along with, and then, you are viewing that you're creating a portrait relationships between them, or like you could do all sorts of interesting things.
Oh, right.
And
but they don't have libel laws in the wizarding world. Citation, Order of the Phoenix, Book 5.
Right. Exactly. I think since it's the wizarding world and they don't have much regulation of anything, think like love potions, I would say I'm sure they don't. But it seems like something that someone should think about is that potentially someone could be portraying people in a way that would be extremely inaccurate or offensive, or
That's interesting.
Yes, Headmaster Dumbledore, why is your portrait snogging Grindelwald?
Okay, well, that's accurate, so.
Allegedly.
Sure.
I feel like because they don't have any of the regulatory systems, you wouldn't necessarily have to worry about it, but also the whole portrait system feels very much to me like almost like a Renaissance era of, like, you have a patron who, like, pays you to do these things. You're not going to just, like, or you have, like, a client specifically. Like, you're not going to just paint a portrait of someone to paint a portrait of them, because it's, like, a waste of material and time and things like that. I feel like it's more, they aren't just, like, painting for fun and then putting their own things out there to be bought and sold. It's very much like someone has commissioned, that's the word I was looking for, commissioned this portrait. So I feel like this specific like type of painting wouldn't necessarily have that issue. Also because I can't imagine there's too many people who are just, like, portraiture artists. I can't imagine that's a very common common thing to have as your profession. So
it's one of those interesting things where if there wasn't photography also in the Wizarding world, I might disagree with that assumption that there's not that many portraiture people.
Yeah.
But because we actually do have photography, which in the Wizarding world shows that there is somewhat magic in just an image itself. Because it's not as if you have to have a special wizarding camera to take a photo that moves. In Chamber of Secrets, it talks about how, I think it's Lee Jordan or somebody shows Colin Creevey how to dunk the picture in a potion that will then cause movement that is realistic to the actual event itself. And we have that photo of Harry trying to, run away from Gilderoy Lockhart a bunch that Colin Creevey takes. And so in terms of going back to your question with, like, is there residual magic that floats into an image or not? It seems like there is something inherently magical about images that can be picked up on by magic some way, shape, or form.
I wonder if that potion is the same as is used in the paints for a magical portrait, and it's just the difference with a photograph versus a painting is that the photograph is literally a single second of time, so you only get the sort of
in moment attitudes,
very, very, very simple attitude, behavior, can't talk back to you and so forth, whereas someone might be sitting for weeks even, certainly hours, to get a portrait painted. So there's more time to capture more of the essence of the person.
Right.
Taking promotional photos in the Wizarding world must be horribly terrible then, because you have to fake happiness in such a way that the photograph doesn't pick up on the fact that you might actually not be having that much fun having your photo taken.
Oh my gosh.
That is really funny. That is funny.
Yeah.
I mean, the good thing is that the photos can't talk. So you can't have your photo betraying you by being like, I am really bored right now.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I feel like most of the photographs that we see though are more candid, or like of genuinely happy events, like weddings and things like that. And so, because I feel like the only really posed photos that we see are James and Lily's wedding, and then the Order of the Phoenix.
Daily Prophet has a bunch.
And the 4 champions, I think. But most of the other ones are a single person, or it's a candid, or something like that. And in the candids,
the posters, there are Quidditch posters as well.
Oh, okay. I don't know that any of those situations, anybody is trying to fake happiness, because they're either genuinely happy or it's a circumstance where it's fine if they aren't appearing happy.
Yeah.
I think that I actually think that faking happiness, then your photo self will fake happiness because that was your intention in the moment. Whereas Harry, when he is forced to be in that photo with Gilderoy Lockhart, his intention is to get the hell away from Gilderoy Lockhart. So his photo self is all right, let's get out of here. So I think it's it's capturing what you wanted in that moment. So if what you wanted in that moment is to show yourself as happy, then your photo self will do that. I
like that. I think that's right.
Mm-hmm. But I could imagine, getting back to your original point of are there that many painters anymore in the wizarding world? I could imagine that is a little bit more of an old school thing. It seems like the photography that happened after Muggles developed photography, and wizards were oh, that's cool. We could do this. We could make these move. So I'd say probably it used to be a much more prestigious position to be a painter, which does make me wonder, did they used to have extracurricular classes at Hogwarts in painting? Because we don't see any art classes or anything. So if you wanted to be a painter, how would you develop those skills?
Well, if we're going by the argument that it's using a particular potion, then maybe it's a potion that they teach them about in one of the later years at Hogwarts, and otherwise it's just after you finish Hogwarts, you go and do an apprenticeship, because that seems more likely in keeping with the style of the education.
Yeah, I'd say probably an apprenticeship. Mm-hmm.
But in order to become an actual good painter, you do need to start from a young age for the most part. But also maybe they can enchant a paintbrush to do it for them. But still, that seems like that takes a lot of skill too. So I don't know.
What we do know about the portraits themselves is Rowling writes that there are several enchantments the portraiture uses in order to ensure that it does all the things that it's supposed to. So they may use a potion for the actual paint itself. That's speculation on our behalf. But it does actually say in the text that Rowling writes that it is enchantments for the portrait. And it does seem like they are different from the enchantments used on chocolate frog cards, which seem to be a different sort of photo and or painting. Because I'm not even sure it's a painting. I forget what the exact terminology is in Sorcerer's Stone. I'll look it up while y'all are talking.
I thought they seemed more like just a wizarding photograph than a specific painting. But yeah,
but some of the people on the chocolate frog cards aren't alive anymore, so they would have to be paintings. Yeah, so it might be a combination,
some sort of drawn medium,
or it's a painting, but it's not done in the presence of the person, so you don't capture as much of the essence of the person,
right?
Because they're not sitting for it, so it's just.
Mm-hmm. And I can even see with chocolate frog cards, they may even use existing portraits as just a reference. So it's like a copy of a copy almost.
Yeah, I could
Because
imagine
they
that.
still, because of the enchantments, they're still able to like move and things, but they don't seem to talk. That would be kind of crazy if you had a whole collection of chocolate frog cards and
Just
they're all
everybody yelling at you. So the actual phrase in Sorcerer's Stone is, quote, from chapter 6, Journey Platform 9 3/4. Harry unwrapped his chocolate frog and picked up the card. It showed a man's face. He wore half-moon glasses, had a long crooked nose and flowing silver hair, beard, and mustache. Underneath the picture was the name Albus Dumbledore. So they must do some other thing for, like, Morrigan or Merlin or other people in there, unless they're, like, photographing skeletons.
Well, I'm not sure. Picture to me doesn't necessarily mean
photograph.
Photo.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Picture to me could be
You paint a
drawing
picture.
or
You can,
photograph.
I mean, picture is just completely general. It could be a cartoon of them.
Okay.
Yeah, could be anything.
It's like a stick figure with half-moon glasses and a beard.
What I do wonder, though, is like, okay, when Dumbledore disappears from the chocolate frog card, and like, where do they go? Like, I know with paintings, they can go, if they have a painting in a different place, they can go to that different painting, or they can like go into somebody else's neighboring painting or something like that. But like with the chocolate frog cards, if Dumbledore leaves, like, does he show up in one of his other chocolate frog cards? Like, is it like suddenly there are two Dumbledores in one of your cards and they're chatting to each other? Does he go to somebody else's card? Or does he just leave because he doesn't feel like being there anymore and he's just gone?
I had this
like,
same
I don't really
question.
understand how that works.
Yeah, I had the same question because with the chocolate frog cards, I feel like it would be weird if there's only one that's on, 200 different chocolate frog cards and it's just one Dumbledore going through all 200 of them. But then it would also be weird to have multiple.
Well, the idea I had with the chocolate frog cards is that they're all depicting exactly the same thing. So if two people are looking at their Dumbledore card at the same time, they will both see him wink and then walk out. In sync, as it were, because it's the same depiction.
Okay, but where does he go?
The ether.
The room of requirement where there is a good collection of chamber pots.
Yeah, into non-being, which is to say everything.
Okay, so I think this is like a decent segue into moving into multiple portraits. So prominent persons got to have their portraits in places like Hogwarts, the Ministry, St. Mungo's, and if you were even more important, then you could have multiple in those locations. And I'm sure, other places are high up on the list, but those are like the three main ones that we really see, besides like individual homes or something like that. But so my question on moving between portraits, we see the Hogwarts inhabitants of the portraits move to each other's frames all the time. But it seems like distance matters. And so the reason why only like prominent people have multiple portraits in these locations is so that they can travel between them. And then that, like, so that they can't like jump a building unless they have their own frame sitting somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then that kind of got me like, well, is it one person doing the portrait and then they create multiple frames and enchant it with the same thing? So it's one.
Yeah.
So like if
I think it is, yeah.
if Dilys Derwent is in the headmaster's office, she's not in her portrait at St. Mungo's.
Right.
And if she's in her portrait at St. Mungo's, she's not in the headmaster's office. So like is one their default? Like is one their like home and then the others are like their visiting they're visiting portraits. So like St. Mungo's is like often that frame is empty because she's almost always in the headmaster's office, or vice versa. Can you be called through your empty frame?
You can.
Yes, because Dumbledore does it.
Yeah, you can.
Oh, right, he
For
does
her.
do that, yeah.
There does seem to be a distinction between specific portraits of a person versus paintings in general. So, like the headmaster's portraits are all a painting of that person.
Yeah, nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
And those ones are able to go between different paintings of that person. So that's sort of linked there, whereas the other paintings are just a general painting that happens to have people in it. Like, we don't see Sir Cadogan ever popping up in one of the headmaster's portraits.
Although it feels like he
And
could.
we don't see the...
But it would take a long time to get
if
there.
he could, he would, and that would be awkward for all concerned. So it's like they're on a separate system somehow, but they can
Yeah.
only go to their own portraits, whereas the general portraits, it seems to be a different sort of connection because they're not necessarily painted by the same person. They could have been painted
Right.
hundreds of years
Centuries
apart
apart, yeah.
or things, but people are moving between them.
Well, we see the head people in the head office, you know, like cajoling and brandishing whatever, like a thick walking stick or something at Phineas Nigellus. And so it appears that they have some semblance of ability to move among themselves. And I don't know that there's a specific...
No, they're in their own frame just yelling at him, though.
Yes.
They're not actually
But they
his
can
portrait.
leave. They do leave the headmaster's office altogether during the Battle of Hogwarts. So we do know that they can go to other portraits within Hogwarts, but I don't think other portraits in Hogwarts can go to them.
Yeah.
You know?
Do we know that they have gone to other portraits in Hogwarts?
I think it's heavily implied that they went to watch the battle. As in, I think that's what Harry says when he goes up to use the pensieve during the battle to do Snape's memories. And he is basically like, oh, all of the portraits are gone. They, must have gone to watch what was happening in the battle. So I think the headmaster portraits, I think can go to other paintings within Hogwarts, but I don't think the other paintings in Hogwarts can go to the headmaster's office. Like, I think there's some magic there where it's like, it's not like Sir Cadogan could go into Phineas Nigellus's frame, but Phineas Nigellus could go into his frame, is my understanding.
It's possible. I mean, that to me reads a little bit like Harry's thought of, that's what Harry would do in that position, but the headmaster's portraits may all be thinking, I'm getting out of here and going to their other frames far away from Hogwarts.
That's true.
They don't want to watch, they want to be out of there.
But they are honor bound to, support the school. So I think that they, might feel like they need to know what's going on.
They're supporting the school by preserving their knowledge for whoever's left after the battle.
Potentially.
Well, and they're honor bound as the quote is honor bound to give service to the present headmaster.
That is true.
And they don't really have a headmaster at this point because
Snape's dead by that point.
Yeah, Snape's dead and nobody else is the headmaster. So they very well could have been essentially released from service.
No, but they come back literally right after Harry defeats Voldemort. They're all back, and they're like, "Wow, you did such a great job." So I kind of think they were watching. I like that interpretation better. But if you want to believe they ran away, that's fine too.
Well, I'm not saying they necessarily ran away. I mean, if their other portraits are in other prominent locations, like St. Mungo's or Ministry of Magic or things like that, those could be very helpful places to recruit people. Be like, hey, go to Hogwarts. There's ish is going down.
That's very fair.
It's both. They are watching from a safe distance.
Yeah,
but I think it doesn't really make sense for the Hogwarts headmaster portraits to not be able to go into any of the other portraits in Hogwarts because that might be part of them supporting the headmaster is spying around the school. So I think there must be some magic where they can go into other portraits, but other portraits can't go into them. Within Hogwarts.
I definitely agree that I think nobody else can go into theirs.
Yeah. I'd say within a how I'm imagining it is like within a magical building, portraits generally, like, people in the portraits generally can go into each other's paintings, but you can't just like jump across, you can't jump into a different building unless you have a painting there. Yeah, unless it's your own painting in another building. And like, and if you're going to different portraits, you have to like, you can't like just jump from one end of the castle to the other. You have to like literally go through every single portrait on the way. So it's like, you know, it takes time to get there.
Yeah. It's almost like a walking versus apparating. Like, they're walking through all, if they want to get from the headmaster's office down to the Great Hall or something, they'd have to like walk through all of the paintings all the way down. But then just to bounce over to their own portrait seems more like it does. It seems like maybe not instantaneous, like they're traveling somehow, but I feel like it's a lot quicker than having to like run. Yeah.
It does seem like even if maybe they can't, like, okay, even if we're thinking about like one person who has multiple portraits, they do seem to be able to like be aware of what's going on in portraits, even if they aren't physically in the portrait. I don't know if there's like an in-between space where they can just listen, because we see with Phineas Nigellus that he like, it's a blank portrait when Harry's in that room, but like Harry can hear him like sniggering or whatever. So clearly Phineas is like listening to what's going on or like watching or something like that, even if he's not in there. So I wonder if they have some like magical ability to like kind of generally know what's going on in the vicinity.
This kind of ties in with the thought I had later, actually, that what is the experience like from the perspective of the portrait?
Yeah.
So, I mean, is travelling between portraits like travelling through the Floo, and that you see a whole lot of frames with different scenes out in the world until you eventually get to the one you want? Or is it like, are they in a 3D space with a hole in the wall that looks out on a Hogwarts corridor? Or are they in are they 2D?
Mm.
And they're just a thing on a backdrop and can sort of shuffle to the side and hide.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm trying to recall if this is in the book or if it's just my recollection from like watching the portraits in the movies, but it does seem like they can move. You know, like if there's a painting that has like a field and you have the foreground and the background, they can move from foreground to background and whatnot.
It does seem like that's the case, yes.
And Ariana, and I think they depict Ariana as doing that as well.
Yes. When
Ariana goes, but then there's also the question of, is that just a special case because she's guarding a secret passageway?
Right.
But I do believe that they can move kind of in a 3-dimensional space within a 2-dimensional image.
I agree.
I feel like that is kind of what's going on there, is they do have some sort of like a liminal space situation going on. But also another thing I think that confirms this is the paintings that are next to each other, they can talk to each other. And if you're flat on a wall, you can't see whoever's flat on a wall next to you, but they can talk to each other as if they're looking at each other.
That's a good point.
And so I feel like there's some space that we don't see because we're viewing it as the people in the castle or whatever are viewing it as a 2-dimensional situation, but the experience of the inhabitants is in a 3-dimensional space, and there has to be some sort of like walls aren't an issue because they are like communicating to each other, talking to each other, next to each other, and able to like move into that frame in a way as if they're almost walking through a doorway. So I feel like I there has to be something there where there's like a 3-dimensional space living in a 2-dimensional existence.
I'm imagining it like a little bit like, okay, so they are in a sort of 3-dimensional space, but I kind of imagine it like it looks kind of painted. Like, it looks kind of, it looks painted, but it's 3-dimensional. And that maybe, like, to each side of them, they can see sort of a portal into the 3-dimensional spaces on either side, like the portraits on either side. So they look to their right and they can, like, see through the portal their neighbor, and then they can decide whether to go through there or not.
Well, how does that connection develop? I mean, this is the other intriguing thought about, like, if you put two paintings on the wall next to each other, are they just immediately able to go back and forth, or does it take time to develop a link between them?
That also, yeah.
Because I thought that
That's interesting.
I thought that when they're complaining about, when Sir Cadogan is leading them to I think it's the divination classroom at the start of the 3rd book, and he leads them all the way around uphill and down dale and all around the castle, and eventually they get there. And I'm wondering if part of that is because he's actually leading them on a sensible route, but it's based
for
on...
a portrait.
Yeah, it's based on which portraits he can jump to.
Interesting.
From a textual standpoint, what we know is that there's something called, right, the ether, or like the nothingness, or all being. And we know that portraits have a sense of auditory and sight-based sense. What we don't know is what the magic, how that appears to them. And what we also don't know if there's an actual, like, physicality between the two portraits, that they're like a portal or something like that. What we do know is that when the portraits are non-existent in the material world, that their auditory sense does still work. I'm a bit unconvinced that it is going to, like, physically manifest itself for a painting, that they have an actual sense of life and being where they're seeing their own versions of magic. It might just be that they have a sense of, like, I can not be here and then I can be here, and then I can not be here and then I can be here, without it needing to necessarily physically manifest itself to them in their eyes, in their painted eyes.
Interesting. I feel like that makes sense. Yeah, that they can have, like, a space between where they're not necessarily in a frame or in a portrait at some point. Because I also think that even when they're moving from portrait to portrait, they don't immediately appear in the next one. It's like they're moving through the space in the middle.
Yeah, through the wall.
I think I agree with that for sure.
Okay, different theory. Maybe it's that they don't see other paintings immediately, but they walk out of their frame into this nothingness space, and then they can walk into any other frame if they're choosing, but it has to be one that they're familiar with and aware of to actually get there. And so that's why you get connections between paintings in the same place, in the same building, because they can see them and know, there's another painting right there I can go to. And so the connection is the person in the portrait knowing that, there's a painting there I can get to.
Or it could be like, if we think about whoever is designing where all of the paintings go, like, basically maybe whoever is curating Hogwarts's painting collection. Maybe it's something where, like, there's an enchantment that they put in where it's like, okay, each painting can go into its neighboring paintings. Or maybe it's like the frame they use. It's like, okay, if you put all of them in this frame that's enchanted in the same way, it means that you can travel between them. And if the frame is different, that means they can't. Like, there might be a complicated sort of curation process that is how this magic develops.
I think that's one of the reasons why I feel as if the movement between headmasters' frames is possible. I don't necessarily think that pictures can't go in there. I think that there's a sense of reverence that maybe they shouldn't. But in terms of pictures being able to go back and forth between, there's nothing in the text that backs up this assertion that, like, you cannot go into a certain portrait, etc., etc. The only thing that does seem possible is that you cannot jump a building. Like, there does seem to be need to be a certain level of proximity, but even that is more speculative than textually based.
Right. I mean, there does seem to be a sense of you can't necessarily jump from one portrait to a portrait within the same building that's like several portraits down.
Right.
Because so like it seems like, yes, the portraits can move between each other within the building. We don't have any evidence that they can't move to any specific place, but they do have to like do it in a one by one kind of way in an order.
Yeah.
So then that makes me think, how far apart do they have to be
that's my
to
question
not be
as well.
able to travel?
And also, how dense are the portraits at Hogwarts? Like, there's probably a lot in some areas, like the main staircase, but there's probably none at all in other areas.
Well, I was just thinking, like, if one portrait's like causing trouble or bothering people too much, you just like relegate them to like a far hallway all by themselves.
Yeah.
For a little while, and then
hang it opposite Myrtle's bathroom.
Yeah.
See, that's what they should have done with Cadogan.
Yeah. If everybody was so annoyed.
He does help out kids occasionally.
Yes. He's one of those personality types that's just, he's great in a small dose. Like, he has a lot of personality and a lot of like always trying to challenge people and things, and so he comes off pretty wacky, but he's not necessarily like a bad guy. But I'm sure being a portrait and having him like run into your frame randomly or like trample over you with his horse or something, or his pony.
Feels like he was painted with some particularly vivid colors.
Yeah. Probably.
I mean, this does give me a question of like, how much can relationships develop between people and portraits who didn't know each other when they were alive? Like, the fat lady and her friend Violet, like, did they know each other? Like, you know, also, I mean, I have a whole other question. Actually, okay, we'll stick to this question first. So, like, it seems to me like they have to develop relationships with each other even after they die. Like, if we take the headmasters, I know they're not the most typical portrait, but like, they all seem like all frustrated with Phineas Nigellus all the time, and you know, they probably didn't all like know him when he was alive. Or like, I kind of doubt that the fat lady and Violet actually knew each other. Like, so it seems like they do develop on their own in an interesting way. That leads to the question of like,
slight counterpoint.
Yeah.
All the headmasters, if
previous to
Nigellus would have learnt about him from his portrait, but all the ones post Nigellus would have experienced his portrait already.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. That's true. To me, it seems like what we see sometimes with magical objects is that they develop personalities of their own that people didn't expect.
Very much.
Like we see with like the Ford Anglia, it's not, it developed its own personality from its experiences. So I think like when the portrait is first made, it is representing the artist's view of the subject, but then based off of that artist's view of the subject, then that portrait is living its own life and then develops new experiences, meets new people, and like based off of the personality, like its personality is not going to change, but based on that personality, it might get along really well with this other portrait that has a similar personality, or it might have a hard time with this other portrait. So I think they develop their own experiences and therefore their own relationships. So I think they sort of change their experiences over time, even if their personalities stay similar.
Yeah.
They seem like an AI that has been programmed with parameters where it can act within those parameters but never go beyond.
Yeah.
But like, okay, I find it very fascinating that the fat lady and Violet like get into this like vat of wine and get super drunk, and like it's like they are able to have these like physical experiences and the ramifications of those experiences.
Or at least pretend. Yeah.
And it is sort of, it is interesting to think that like this is now like a memory that the fat lady has of all of these shared times of getting up to shenanigans with Violet that is completely separate from whoever she was based off of. And I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is neat magic.
And the question is it something that they do every year at the same sort of time?
Well, I think we would see that because it was Christmas time, and usually Harry's at Hogwarts for Christmas.
That's true.
But it does give the question of, like, do those monks or whoever get their wine back? Or, like, once it's drunk, it's gone? Like, or is it, like, an endless supply of wine because it was just painted as being, like, a wine, like, painting, whatever. Barrel, yeah.
And tying in with the idea of paintings being a bit like an AI version of a person, they're also a bit like NPCs in a role-playing game. So they're in the background going through their little routines, and hopefully that conveys that they've got a measure of personality and life to them, and it depends on how much has been put into them in the first place. And they may be sitting at a bar drinking, but it is just that a setting has been put somewhere of bottle contains wine. Bottle now not contains wine. Character equals drunk.
Yeah.
If the main character leaves and comes back again, it resets, and so the bottle contains wine again.
Right. That's fair.
Oh, that would be interesting.
Yeah.
I think we even posited in a different episode that someone's in charge of repainting the wine and food.
No, that's funny.
That's really funny.
And so
I thought it was Sam that had a big rant about this in a previous episode.
I did. No, I did. I absolutely.
Was it?
Yeah, it was me. Who,
Where did the wine go?
I just.
Yes.
I at least I was one of the people on there. I don't know if I don't remember if I was the main one, but I do. I'm not thoroughly convinced that the paintings actually get drunk. I think that the programming of the enchantments makes it so that they know how to act like whatever that they see in real life. So if Violet and the fat lady have trained their portraits, or the artist has seen that they are likely to be gluttonous and drink a lot, etc., that the painting can do a good job of putting that face on. But it's hard for me to. Basically, I have this trouble with the portraits. Either they have a really good job of being able to pretend and show off and do all this stuff. And so if you take a bite of cheese, they can pretend like they're full. If they drink a lot of wine, they can pretend like they get drunk. And they're very good at putting on a face like that because that's literally what they do. They're a portrait. They're a face. Versus the magic is so good that the wizarding community has accidentally created artificial intelligence, but in a portrait setting. And these are now all lives, immortal lives, that need to be curated in a way so that we don't cause mass death or genocide if you burn the castle down, or if you take all the portraits and you throw them out or you put them in the garbage. Because it does seem like we're either in between sort of a binary of like, yeah, they pretend and they can put on the show and all of that stuff, versus like, no, they are gaining relationships and creating new memories and have feelings and have a sense of self and all of the sort of stuff that means they have created, not maybe as complex as a human life, but like these are social patterns and stuff that go beyond the complexity of animals on Earth. So that's kind of where I sit, is in between those two binaries.
Well, I think in the world of Harry Potter, we know that souls exist and that souls are like what make, a human being kind of. I think we know that these paintings don't have souls. So I think that within the sort
you're getting into the debate on if AI is a life or not, because it can think for itself, even though it doesn't have a sense of human biology or a religious sense of soul either.
Well, okay. I would say AI is not alive. That's my personal belief.
I'm the opposite side.
It doesn't... What?
AI cannot yet think for itself.
Yeah, and it doesn't...
Talking about something like ChatGPT.
Right, not the current public-facing version. That's true.
It doesn't feel pain. It doesn't, like...
Pain. It can.
I mean, does it feel emotions, or does it
No, it does not.
express emotions because, like, express emotional words because it's learned how to express emotional words, you know?
Right, yes.
So I think
that's
that
the debate.
to me, you're saying, like, oh, are they acting, or are they, like, you're putting AI and them acting on two different sides of the spectrum,
that's
whereas
true.
to me, like, that I would see them as being kind of like an AI in that they have been programmed by magic to act in a certain way, to respond to prompts in a certain way,
Yes.
to
follow these patterns.
If that's the way that the portraits are acting, then I'm very, very okay with all of that.
Okay. That's my personal
Rather than them actually
belief.
drinking wine and getting drunk, or I actually have a friendship with Violet and these memories are real and new and it changes my behavior.
Okay, but you're when you say acting, like, to me that actually sounds more human. That sounds more like they have a brain and they're like, oh, this is, what I should pretend to be like.
Yeah. So they know the programming of, like, there's wine in this thing. I drink this, therefore I should act drunk. That would be the 101010 sort of choices that are happening. Versus if the portrait is able to actually drink wine and feel the effects of what alcohol does to the human body, that's very different than knowing in sort of an NPC way, I go over here, I do this, therefore I have to act this way.
Yeah, but I guess I agree with you. I think that this is all happening within them in a way that is like, they don't have a brain that's thinking like, oh, if I drink wine, therefore I will then... that is happening underneath the surface. I agree, but they're not actually thinking that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
What I'm saying? The distinction.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's how I understand it. Is like,
page.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like there is something in their coding that they are going around the world, doing whatever, but it's all, from this
all
magical encoding.
Yeah. And there's not an actual sense of realness behind it.
Yeah, I think a good example of this is Dumbledore's portrait. Because with the headmaster's portraits, they I guess, like, a little in depth on just them in general, like, they're painted while the headmaster is still alive, and the headmaster keeps the portrait and imparts knowledge so that it can continue helping the next generation of headmasters and whatnot. And they can train it kind of as much or as little as they want. I feel like the more simplistic your time as headmaster, the less you probably have to impart. But, in difficult times, you probably have a lot more wisdom or information or something to pass along. So with Dumbledore even went so far as to train his portrait to give Snape further instruction. And that, I think that's the difference, is the portrait was told at this time, tell Snape XYZ, not, oh, I should advise him with this information. Like, the portrait was literally given, like, a specific set of circumstances. And I even think that, Dumbledore's portrait shows approval of Harry's decision about the Elder Wand. I do feel like that is something that Dumbledore would have said. Should Harry decide X with Elder Wand react, like, this is what we think of that. This with the Elder Wand, this with the, like, if he doesn't come to you at all, don't mention it. Like, I feel like those things, when Dumbledore is imparting all of this knowledge onto his portrait, which I have to imagine he spent a lot of time doing.
Is there anyone who did tell everything to?
I have to, like, those topics, especially with Horcruxes and Hallows, he would have a lot of, like, this is what we feel about this, so that the portrait would know how to react. But it's not him creating his own idea as a portrait of like what he did. So I think that that's like that's the very clear, like, they are coded with this information and this, they're not forming opinions. They've been given opinions.
Yeah, that's how I feel as well.
Yeah.
Ceci n'est pas son Dumbledore.
Yeah.
If you're familiar with Magritte's The Treachery of Images.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think what I would say as well, though, is like there are going to be situations, especially with the headmasters, where like the living headmaster did not like program them with a specific like if this then that. So they are sort of using kind of like, I mean, I'm not a huge tech person, but sort of like how ChatGPT can like sort of use the information it's been exposed to create a response. I think that the headmasters would sort of look at all of the information they've been exposed to from the living person and be like they could probably, even if Dumbledore hadn't said something about the Elder Wand, they could like sort of look at what they know about Dumbledore and stuff and be like, yeah, I think that seems like good advice. Like that's, or the advice that Dumbledore would give.
100%. We even see that with when Harry is asking Dumbledore's portrait about like, hey, if I just drop the rock, we're good, right? And if I die of natural causes, the Elder Wand won't blank, right? And so it's all within parameters, though. And I think that's what we're all getting at is nothing can happen outside of the parameters.
Mm-hmm.
In that, I hope that Dumbledore's portrait is a bit more advanced than ChatGPT because it's renowned for just sort of agreeing to things that people say. So
making stuff up.
Hey, if I die with this, that's fine, isn't it? Yes.
Yes. Oh no! Now I feel. Now I feel way worse about the ending of the books.
That's one of the reasons that I actually like him breaking it in the film.
Yes.
It's yes, he should have repeated his one first,
definitive.
But it does put a nice closer on the right. No more of that.
So on a potentially lighter note, not potentially, it is a lighter note because I'm going to bring up fan favorite, podcast favorite individual,
Pigwidgeon.
Pigwidgeon. Most portraits seem to be of dead people, with the exception of those who, are training their portrait during their life. We don't see too many portraits of people who are alive, with the notable exception of Gilderoy Lockhart. And I have to wonder, does this contribute to his huge ego by having himself around himself all the time? Is this making him even more conceited than he already is? Is he training his portraits? They don't do much besides nod or curl their hair or smile.
Which is all that the real Lockhart does.
Exactly. Does this hint at his lack of magical prowess? Because his portraits can't do a whole lot.
He's not that powerful. Yeah. Okay, so to clarify,
he's created his own echo chamber.
To give a tellback, Sierra, you are saying, all right, Gilderoy Lockhart we know is an egotistical man already. Therefore, he has commissioned several, at least a dozen, if not hundreds or thousands, of portraits of himself that he is then surrounded by. And by being surrounded by his own good looks and training them in his own ways, which is not very much and basically just ego related, has he then created a Reddit thread where only he and his own NPCs are in, chatting to him about his amazingness.
Exactly.
That is
hilarious. If that's what you're saying, then I am 100% in agreement with you.
I think it's just over time, it's multiplying and compounding upon itself, his ego. Because he's constantly exposed to it.
Is it just in the movies that there's one painting of him painting himself?
Yeah,
that's just in the movie, but it's hilarious.
It's so good.
But so good.
It's so good. I consider it canon,
which suggests that at some point he obliviated an artist.
Yeah, yeah, precisely. I love that.
Oh, that's so good.
Okay, I think there's actual textual evidence for this.
No, I pay
The reason I think there's actual textual evidence for this, and
Okay.
Excellent.
the reason I think that is because, Gilderoy Lockhart, his memory charm backfires. He loses his memory, and we only see him very briefly in that second book before he goes to St. Mungo's. And one of the things that's very out of character for him to say is that someone, I think it's Dumbledore, says something about, or maybe it's Harry, someone can check this, says like, "Oh, Professor Lockhart," and he's like, "Oh, Professor was I? Suppose I was hopeless," which is not a very Lockhart thing to say. That is a very much Lockhart just lost his memory. But if you were at St. Mungo's trying to help someone get your memory back, and you learned that they had dozens of portraits that they had trained of themselves during their life, you would think this is a great way to get their memory back, is just to expose them to all of their portraits. Yeah. That will help them remember themselves. And all that we see of Lockhart in St. Mungo's is that he is egocentric again. Like, all of that of like, "Oh, I suppose I was hopeless," completely gone. He's like, "I suppose you want my autograph." Like, he's obsessed with himself again.
I've learned joined up writing.
Yeah, so I'm thinking that he watched himself in his portraits and is like, "Oh, this is what I'm like," and then just like took that on again.
And it could be that the nurses at St. Mungo's were fans.
Yeah.
Yeah. That too.
Yeah. We should keep track of things that we officially make canon on the podcast, and this is the first one.
This is definitely not the first one.
No, I'm saying this is now the first official one because I just came up with the idea. There's definitely other times that we have made things canon.
That is fair.
I'm sure Patrick will insert a clip of Sam saying exactly the same thing 36 episodes ago.
Well, I was going to say, I don't know that any of us have the time to re-listen to 51 episodes to find all the other things we've made canon.
No! God, please, no!
Someone else can add to our list.
So if anybody happens to remember something, please put it in the comments.
Yes. That's so funny.
Please don't go on a scavenger hunt for it unless this is your first episode. If this happens to be your first episode of our podcast, please feel free to listen to all the other ones.
I issue the challenge for somebody to go through all of them.
On my first episode, we decided that Draco was a secret fan of Martin Miggs the Mad Muggle. So,
oh yes,
I remember that.
Yes.
Oh yes. Seb, you're issuing a challenge.
I am. To any of our longtime listeners, first-time callers. Please go through all 51 episodes, figure out what the other things are, and we'll put your name on the wall. It'll say 3 Broomsticks canon provided by X user, and then it'll have all the stuff, and it'll be great.
Compiled by, yes. Make a list.
Yes. Fantastic.
Yes, so training his portrait, absolutely. It is, Sierra, you make a really good note there in terms of like, hey, he's not a very powerful wizard. His portraits can't do anything. Like, they just are doing ego stuff. Although, I really love the headcanon of the fact that this one portrait of Gilderoy, painting Gilderoy in the movies, was actually another artist painting Gilderoy that he painted for himself. And that one of Gilderoy's other portraits walked in, obliviated him, threw him out, and now only pretends to be painting.
So funny.
I love it.
Exactly.
I wonder, can you use portraits to solve crimes, or do you think it would be inadmissible? I mean, the wizarding justice system is terrible, so it's probably not inadmissible, but what do y'all think?
What do you mean? Like
as a witness?
Using them as a witness
or
something?
We'll get to the witness part in a little bit. Don't step on the witness part yet.
Yeah.
But in terms of the portrait itself, it says, "Oh yeah, I did do that." How do you know? Because he told me.
Like admissions of guilt. Oh, interesting.
Well,
I mean, I feel like at the point that most of these portraits are like around the person's dead anyway, so
I would say no, because if we're taking the artist's prejudices into account, then I think, it's not necessarily an accurate portrayal of the...
That's a good
Right.
point.
So if Walburga Black's portrait suddenly confesses to killing 600 muggles, people might be like, yeah, but did the artist like her or not?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
So
that makes perfect
Plausible,
sense.
but it's not evidence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Cool. Good.
Well,
yeah, we'll get to the witness part in just a second here.
yes. I thought we've talked about kind of like most of the notable portraits throughout this series. But there's just a couple little like tidbits that I wanted to talk about. So obviously we already talked about the fat lady and the fat lady's friend Violet. And then Dilys Derwent with her double portraits, but also with her is Everard, who is another one that gets sent off at the same time as Dilys. But his second portrait's in the Ministry of Magic, which I think is very interesting. Do we know, is it, they had a career at the ministry and then became a headmaster?
Or they did
Do
some
all
sort of...
headmasters die while in office? Like, is that the only way a headmaster isn't a headmaster anymore? They all die?
I think...
Or did it go the other way around?
No, I think Armando Dippet retired.
Oh, right.
I think most of them die in office, but I think Armando Dippet retired. I think someone can check me on that, but I'm pretty sure.
Okay. But so we're assuming that, like, if they have a Ministry of Magic portrait or a St. Mungo's portrait, that was probably before their tenure as headmaster.
Yeah.
They did something awesome there. I don't know that that's true. I think we don't know who retired or who dies while headmaster. It'd be quite traumatic. Just working in education, most principals and headmasters retire and don't just die.
Yeah.
And so I assume that that's true as well.
Yeah, I mean, does the text ever specify that these portraits are specifically after people die, or is it after they retire? Because
it seems like they go up when they retire because Dippet is up there when he should be alive, and Dumbledore is visiting with Tom Riddle when he's headmaster.
Okay. That's a good point. I forgot about that one.
But if we think about the fact that Dumbledore is headmaster and like keeps on getting offered the Minister of Magic post, I could imagine that some headmasters, like if they're talented enough or whatever, might be recruited for other high up positions in other places.
So it could be that they're whatever else they're known for is after
Could
that.
be.
After their tenure as a headmaster.
I'm guessing that, like, people have been heads of St. Mungo's and headmaster, or like a really famous healer, and or contributed a lot of money to the ministry, or like Lucius might, or something of that nature.
Yeah. And you don't seem to need to have like a background in education to be a headmaster at Hogwarts.
No.
You just have to be like a well-known prominent figure, like
for real.
Yeah.
a talented witcher wizard, So it could be someone who has talents in other areas.
They don't have a Department of Education in the Ministry of Magic, and so it seems like their sort of cabinet member for the Department of Education is just the headmaster. So it seems like that is appointed by the school governor position, and could be turned into a political statement.
Yeah.
But isn't the Ministry's Department of Education the one who sends the examiners for the owls and things like that? It's just called something different.
I think the OWL system is not necessarily government, though.
I don't think it
Yeah, because there are
body.
people outside of Hogwarts that come in to administer the owls exams.
Yes, but they're not necessarily the Department of Education.
So presumably they're from the Ministry.
Presumably, but not textually confirmed.
Yeah.
So yes, could absolutely be that there is actually Department of Education, is not confirmed. And that's a great, you mentioned a great point that is like, oh, well, this is a pretty good
Well, there
evidence.
is a Department of Education. It just may not be part of the Ministry.
Yes.
Well, I'm not sure that's true because, like, standardized testing in the United States, it's like, it's its own thing. Like, you know, like the SATs, like they are being run not by the state, right?
Yes, it's published by College Board and administered by the Educational Testing Service, which I believe has funding from the Department of Education, but is not actually related to them.
Yeah, so it could be something
I have to
separate.
imagine it's something similar.
Yeah,
to
like
that.
they get funding from the Ministry of Magic, but they're their own body.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Somebody who lives in England, comment on how your education system works and if the OWLs are government or not.
Or like the equivalent of OWLs, yes.
Yeah.
Another headmaster that I just wanted to bring up. So Phineas, we mentioned, has some fun reactions with the other headmasters, and I just this quote really just kills me every time. Because other headmasters clearly also think that he's a sass monster.
Yeah.
And there's an unidentified headmaster who, in the greatest Jim Dale insubordination, dereliction of duty, is so good. And then Dippet, who jumps in with, "We are honor bound to give service to the present headmaster of Hogwarts. Shame on you, Phineas." And at a separate point,
I love this one.
One or a couple of the portraits give Fudge a rude hand gesture, and I really want to believe it's this same unidentified headmaster.
I love it. Yes.
Yep.
So that's my headcanon, is he's like, Phineas is sassy to the headmaster, and this unidentified man is just so like high strung, but also like will sass those who require it.
Has a short temper. It's great. Yeah, that's during Order of the Phoenix when Dumbledore takes off with Fawkes and escapes from being taken in, and a bunch of portraits are yelling at Fudge, and this guy, I hope he's the same one, gives Fudge rude hand gesture.
Yes. I really want it to be. To me, it's the same guy.
Excellent. 3 broomsticks headcanon. Same guy.
Number two.
One of my favorite versions of portraits is we never actually get his name. We never are told why he's there, other than for the job that he has to do. But to quote this text, "That ugly little man" is a portrait that sits in the Muggle Prime Minister's office. And he seems to have one of the rather most interesting and also most terrible portrait existence. So this little ugly man sits in the Muggle Prime Minister office. So he gets to know all about all the behind-the-scenes workings of what's going on in the Muggle world. But he never really gets to leave his portrait. He has to stay there the whole time until he's summoned by the Minister for Magic to give the Muggle Prime Minister an order, basically. And then he is the messenger of giving orders. So what we see in Half-Blood Prince during the Other Minister chapter is he announces Fudge's imminent arrival, waits for approval from the Muggle PM. He then explains the Minister of Magic's plan to addle the brains of a foreign president for the Ministry of Magic's own convenience. And then, basically just sits there for the rest of his life until he's given another order. So he's a fascinating little, example of a guy who has another portrait because he has to get his orders from somewhere, but then spends his whole life just among the Muggles.
Right.
Oh my gosh. I really hope that he clocks out.
Yeah.
As long as nobody's in that room, he can leave.
Yeah.
Or is he
I really
one of
hope.
the portraits where they haven't put as much personality into it?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. A tactical painting where the government has specifically created something that can follow orders and won't do much else.
Well,
So this leads to a question that I have been having throughout, which is okay, I get it. I understand portraits of existing people, but what about just a painting that isn't of anyone real? could the ministry just commission like an artist to create a person, like not someone
Make me
real,
the ultimate bureaucrat.
Yeah, you're just like making a person and very simply coding them. Or like even in Hogwarts, like, oh, an artist just has an idea for a really fun scene, you know, and just wants to make it. Like, what is the magic like there? Can the artist decide like how much magic to imbue into that painting if it doesn't have a host? Like if it doesn't have a person that it's based off of?
Well, I mean, there are like landscapes, and there's paintings of, or there's, I guess not portraits, but paintings of animals.
Right.
And other such things. So I would have to imagine that they're not imbuing each animal with their own personality.
Or they could be, but it could be like, you know, you've created a painting of a horse and you want this to, or like of horses, and you want like these horses to kind of be the faster ones and these ones to maybe get into fights. Like maybe you have a vision in your head of like what you want the scene to kind of be like. So you might create personalities for the different people or animals, but it's not based off of like a real person.
So like they behave how the artist thinks horses behave as opposed to how horses actually behave.
Or how the artist wants these specific horses to behave or these specific people to behave.
Yeah.
Like it's like, you know, writing fiction, you know, but creating a creating a fictional world in painting.
Interesting.
Or like, yeah, who is going to be like, yeah, I really just want to sit for a portrait of someone who's not very attractive, who's like, yeah, I just really want to sit for this portrait, so that my portrait can sit in the Muggle Prime Minister's office for forever. Like, not everyone is going to want their own likeness to be used, but sometimes it's necessary to just have a painting somewhere to do something specific.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
That is interesting. Yeah, I guess we don't have any textual evidence of any of that, because all the ones that we see, there's an assumption that they were a person ahead of time. However, well, maybe there's the fat lady. Maybe
that's what I was wondering.
Maybe she wasn't an actual person. They just painted,
and that's why she doesn't have a name.
And that's why she exactly
right, because who's gonna sit for a portrait and then just be called the fat lady forever? Like that seems,
well, I mean, people name paintings a lot of things.
Yeah, that's very true. And also people demean themselves all the time for money, especially in more feudal era and medieval times when you could like, yep, you're the fat lady because that's what we call you, and that's the only way you get your money.
Yeah. That's true. That's fair.
Even if it's not demeaning, who remembers the Mona Lisa's actual name?
Yeah,
is it not Mona Lisa?
And it also could be
sorry.
Well, it also could be that you know, like someone painted her. She had a name at the time. At some, you know, centuries later, the painter, the artist is gone, the person is gone, there's no family left to remember exactly what relative that was, and the portrait gets kind of lost to time, rediscovered, and then is like, oh, it's of a fat lady. But maybe the portrait, maybe she was never told what her name was.
The same reason that the Grey Lady is referred to as the Grey Lady.
Right.
She does not want to be known as a Ravenclaw.
Yeah, just like the name has been lost to time. Ooh. And the you know, she herself was never told specifically this is your name.
Mm-hmm.
Or the fat lady also has a secret in her past and doesn't want anyone to know what her real name is.
She's Merope Gaunt.
Or she just drank so much that she doesn't know.
She drinks to forget.
Just like the real woman.
Yes. So there's so many elements.
Or Lockhart's going around and obliviating everybody in portrait style.
Maybe she painted Lockhart's portrait and that's why she has no memory of it.
Oh my god!
It all fits.
So there's one thing I want to bring in at some point, but I don't know if this is a good point. Are we in a transition between topics or?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So I read this really interesting MuggleNet article a while ago that I can link in the show notes. And it's about Filch. And I mean, the main purpose of the article is like, what is Filch's role at Hogwarts? Which is a very fair question, because basically what they're saying is like, okay, he kind of cleans things, but like he can't do magic, so like he can't like keep the whole castle clean, and they have house elves, so like what? And also he kind of does discipline, but so do the professors, so like what is really his role? And you know, we can argue that a different time, but what they posit as a possible role for him as the caretaker is that there is a very like throwaway line in the third book where after the fat lady has been attacked, Filch, Dumbledore says that Filch, he's going to ask Filch to restore her for him. So that means that Filch is like, because the fat lady has been like physically attacked, like, you know, her portrait has been slashed. That means that Filch must have some talents in portrait restoration, in art restoration. And maybe that is something you can do while being a squib. So maybe like this is... like maybe he, you know, took some sort of course in art restoration, you know, how to take care of artwork and artifacts and stuff. And that's how he managed to get a job at Hogwarts. And like, that is part of his role within the castle.
He 100% paints Mrs. Norris on the side.
Yes, I totally believe
like
that.
One of your French cats.
Thank you. Oh my gosh.
I totally believe that.
I was debating whether or not to go with that joke, Matthew. I just like, I'm so glad you said that. Excellent.
Amazing.
The other theory, Filch is like the anti-poltergeist. So where Peeves is the embodiment of chaos in Hogwarts, Filch is the embodiment of order in Hogwarts.
Yes.
So he's always going around trying to clean up and repair things.
Yeah.
And that explains why they're such nemesis.
Diametrically opposed foes.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love it.
And, like, I think there is a fair, like, okay, you know, just on Filch for a moment, like, I think, yes, there are house elves, but it seems to be part of the house elf code at Hogwarts that they can't really be seen. So I think, like, during the day, if there are messes that come up, like, that's Filch's job. But it does seem really interesting, like, what does that role of caretaker mean? Like, the term caretaker could mean caring for all of the different parts of Hogwarts, which does include, like, a ton of portraits. And I wonder if, like, part of it could even be, like, okay, different portraits are next to each other and getting into feuds or fights, or, like, or maybe Filch is the one who is repainting the vat of wine in the monk's painting or whatever it is. Or, like, you know, or, like, cleaning the paintings because, you know, all of the, like, kids' fingertips are getting on them, and, like, he doesn't trust the house elves to clean them properly because, you know, paintings are hard to clean. So, yeah, so it could be, like, a lot of different things that we just don't see him really doing because he's so obsessed with rule breaking. And, like, I'm imagining Dumbledore, like, every time he goes to complain about Peeves, is like, okay, but, like, are you actually doing the things that are your job, or are you just, like, so obsessed with hanging people in the dungeon by their thumbs or whatever?
Yeah.
Because it's the thumbs that they're sticking on the portraits. It all fits.
Wow. Sierra, that really got you. The descent of it's funny to wow, that really hit me hard was great.
every time we get it all fits
It all
joke,
fits.
it just becomes funnier and funnier to me. So it's like every time it just ramps up.
Oh man, excellent.
So whenever Dumbledore goes looking for Filch, he's sort of in his office in a smock and sort of working on his painting.
Yep, that's it. That's all he's doing.
I sort of wondered about the fat lady, like, so the damage is that Sirius, presumably with the same knife that he was brandishing over
Yeah.
Ron later, cut the painting.
Mm-hmm.
And so the repairs was sticking the canvas back together. And the fat lady has escaped somewhere to another painting. So I have two thoughts. One is, would she have, like, the person, as it were, would she have been injured had she stayed in her portrait when it got slashed? And would it be in the same way that, like, if you imagined someone actually being stabbed, or would it just have been, oh no, I've been cut in half because I'm made of canvas and there's now two parts of me?
I imagined it more like there's like a slash mark through her face or something, but it's not like it's bleeding or it's anything like that. Like, I imagine it more like, yeah, like a slash mark, like as if someone had taken like a pen or something and gone across her face and like it's slashed there or something like that. I like in the movies, they have her sort of in like tattered clothing. And I do wonder if like that's part of restoring her, is like, oh, maybe her clothing gets messed up, or yeah, maybe she is slashed in one of her, in some part of her body. Like, is that part of the job, not just the canvas, but like fixing her?
So she's hiding to preserve her modesty.
Yeah, or it might not just be modesty. It could be like, oh, she's embarrassed. She has a slash across her face, and like that's embarrassing. Like, I no longer look like myself.
Yeah.
I was kind of the idea that, because I don't remember the exact line, but it seemed as though she got out of the way and was able to escape, which kind of puts me in the thought that maybe damaging the portrait, the canvas, hurts the enchantments, and that if she herself was damaged, it would harm the enchantments that like make her like, I don't think it would be a reaction like, oh, she's bleeding, but I think it would be like she wouldn't be
like she'd become inert,
able to interact. Yeah, like she wouldn't be able to interact as she currently can, because the enchantments would be damaged because of the physical damage done.
That makes sense.
That was kind of my thought on that one. Because I think you would kind of put also, Matthew, in the doc that maybe she was unable to return to her painting until it was repaired. And I think so, because she, you know, like, obviously she's kind of inconsolable. And so that's why Sir Cadogan steps in for a little while. But I also think part of that is probably that Filch has to finish repairing and restoring her painting, her canvas, and then she can move back into it. Like, I don't think that, and that kind of brings me back to my idea of that the enchantments would be damaged, and that repairing the physical thing would repair the enchantments.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Because obviously Filch doesn't have magic himself, but if he can physically repair the canvas, then it's almost like the enchantment is stitched back together as well.
So the exact wording about the fat lady in the chapter of Prisoner of Azkaban, The Flight of the Fat Lady, is the fat lady had vanished from her portrait, which had been slashed so viciously that strips of canvas littered the floor. Great chunks of it had been torn away completely. And then when Peeves is revealing what happened, he says, "Ashamed, your headship, sir. Doesn't want to be seen. She's a horrible mess. Saw her running through the landscape up on the 4th floor, sir, dodging between the trees, crying something dreadful," he said happily. "Poor thing," he added unconvincingly. And then when they describe what happened or why it happened, it said, and the fat lady, sir, hiding in a map of Argyllshire on the second floor. Apparently, she refused to let Black in without the password, so he attacked. She's still very distressed, but once she's calmed down, I'll have Mr. Filch restore her.
Yeah. So I feel like she was able to escape, but the reason that she's like, quote, a mess, as Peeves says, is because she's so terrified.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. I'd never read it as a mess,
like emotionally,
in that way. Because it says she's ashamed and she's a horrible mess. Like, why would she be ashamed? Because she didn't do anything wrong. Like, is she
people get ashamed when they don't do stuff wrong all the time.
I know, but like, I think
it's like, look at the state of my frame.
Yeah.
Sure, but like, why run away and hide, like, from like Dumbledore? Like, I guess, I mean, I understand why she'd run away from Sirius Black. So I guess, but to me, the sort of like, she's ashamed, she's a horrible mess right after that. I thought she was ashamed of being a horrible mess. Like, I thought that she was ashamed because she was like in such a state, because either he's ripped her clothing or ripped her, like, has destroyed other parts of her painting, and she doesn't want anyone to see her.
Yeah, and I always took that as she's ashamed that she's such an emotional mess.
Yeah, that's how I interpreted it as well.
I interpreted it as she got so scared and ran off, and she's ashamed that she like left her post and was so emotional and scared. And
but like, what?
So that's how I always interpreted it.
But like, okay, yes, she left her post, but there's nothing that she could have done if she had stayed in her post. It's not like, oh, because she left her post, he's able to go through the portrait. Like, the only way he could go through is if she let him.
But she also ran off and didn't, like, tell somebody what happened.
Right, she didn't go running for help. She didn't do the due diligence of making sure that everybody knew what was going on. She didn't raise the alarm.
Right.
And so I think she's embarrassed about the fear that that was there and that led to her making such poor decisions.
Okay. I mean, the thing is, like, I never read it as her being ashamed of her fear, because, like, even when she comes back to her post after Sir Cadogan is left in disgrace, like, she, like, insists on them, like, hiring, like, these, like, security trolls or whatever to, like, so it doesn't seem like has any embarrassment over the fact that she's still afraid. She's still like making demands of like, I'm only going back if you look after me. So I don't know. I mean, I think either way, could work as a as a interpretation
for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of the fat lady, her memory about who did it and being scared and those emotions lasting her a long time brings up one of the biggest questions I have about the portraits, which I don't want to step on the toes of an upcoming episode where we'll be discussing the plot holes of the Harry Potter series, because this is one of the biggest ones to me. But I feel like you can't talk about the portraits without asking the question of, like, what are their visual capacities?
Mm-hmm.
What is how long can their memory last? And if it is as I assume, that they can see everything and that they remember everything, how on earth did people not realize it was a basilisk in the Chamber of Secrets?
It's a good question.
Because Gilderoy's portraits were obliviate.
Oh, God, the entire...
They were just walking up and down the halls, willy-nilly. No.
Oh, that's so funny. Oh my gosh.
That is really funny.
Oh man. It all comes back to Gilderoy. Title of the episode.
It does. This is a subtitle of this podcast. Not this episode.
Just the podcast in general.
It all comes back to
Gilderoy. All comes back to Gilderoy. Oh my gosh. Okay, yeah. All right. So if we throw that out as the actual answer, like, why is it like, is there, how, like, the book, is like spider fears basilisks and all die by their sight? Did they miss the line where it says portraits refuse to snitch on it? Like, what?
Thinking it ties into the discussion of how many portraits there are around Hogwarts. Because if the basilisk is mainly traveling around the not very well frequented areas, there's probably not many portraits there either.
That's fair.
Like if there's room to paint a big sort of message on the wall opposite Myrtle's bathroom, then there can't have been any portraits in the way.
Right.
That's
I think
a great
that's
point.
Fair.
True.
What about the library, though?
They're not in the librray. They're not in the library.
Outside
They
the
leave the
library.
library.
Penelope-
They were near the library.
Near the library. I feel like that's a prime spot for... Anyways, go ahead. Sorry, Sophia.
Anyway,
No,
I mean,
I'd agree with that.
we do see that we see a moment where Hermione is able to put a blindfold on Phineas Nigellus. And that's interesting that you can use magic on a portrait. And that like actually affects their experience. So I would say if Hermione's able to do that.
Does she use magic?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
I'm
think
trying
it's
to
magic.
remember.
Yeah, she does.
Doesn't she just tie a piece of fabric around the
No,
frame?
I think she literally pokes it with his wand.
Yeah.
Okay.
And she puts a
I'll look
blindfold.
remembering.
So if you can use magic on a portrait, and if we're imagining that, like, okay, this is not Ginny first year who is doing this magic, but like her being controlled in a way by Tom Riddle, then yeah, I think it would be easy for him to get her to do some sort of magic to make it so that they can't see or hear what's going on. I just don't think that's that hard.
So she's wandering around in front of the basilisk going, Portratus Sleepius, and
Or
Could be.
or the basilisk literally kills the portrait, and so they have no memory every time it goes by.
I don't think the portraits can die. But
Well,
I
a
think
ghost can't die again either.
Well, you
and
can't-
yet,
that's true.
And yeah,
the ghost was still
so
petrified.
maybe that's the way the magic works with the killing, is it just erases the memory of it. In order to do the Phineas Nigellus thing, she uses Obscuro. At once, Hermione cried Obscuro, and that manifests on the painting as a black blindfold appeared. This is from the text. A black blindfold appeared over Phineas Nigellus's clever dark eyes, causing him to bump into the frame and shriek with pain.
Yeah.
I also think that's so interesting. Sorry, that's like a totally different topic, but that they can hit their own frame and be in pain.
Yes,
That
Or
is
is that
really
just Phineas
interesting.
Nigellus being a drama queen?
probably.
I could see it. There could be both.
I can't see.
Sophia, what were you saying about the basilisk magic?
Yeah, I don't think that the portraits can die even in the same way that Nearly Headless Nick, because Nearly Headless Nick, that is his soul, right? Like or the imprint of his soul. And I think that, like we said, the portraits don't have souls. So I don't think it's like that, but I think it wouldn't be too hard to do some magic to, yes, make them go to sleep, make it so they can't see, do the like muffliato so they can't hear. Like that doesn't seem that hard. Like I think Tom Riddle would have thought of that. He did that probably the first time around.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it seems like if you can Obscuro, it seems like you could Obliviate.
Yeah, seems like you could Obliviate. Yeah, seems like, yeah, you could do a lot of different things. Like, and they can't do magic back. They can't protect themselves. They can't, like, yeah.
Sam, do you have order in front of you right now?
Yeah, I have everything in
Can
front of me.
you? Mine is also in front of me, but I'm holding a small child.
That's fine.
Can you look up when in Grimmauld Place when they're talking about Walburga? Because for some reason I have this like I thought that the portrait is performing its own sticking charm on itself.
They say she put a permanent sticking charm on the back of it, but I believe that they're referring to
the actual
human being, rather than the portrait being
Okay.
able to perform magic.
That was how I
Okay,
took
then
it.
that was
I-
just like child me reading it and being like, a portrait
Yeah,
can do
being like,
magic.
wow, that's so cool. I'm a
Okay.
poor writer.
Okay, so that was just a misunderstanding of the text for me. Okay.
Well, is it just an omission in that no one's actually ever painted a wizard with their wand?
Ah,
Oh,
Well, they
that's
might
funny.
be able to do
Maybe.
magic within portrait world. Like, maybe they can do magic against other portraits, but I don't think they can do magic in the actual world.
Yeah. To answer your question more fully, Sierra, the quote is, "We think she put a permanent sticking charm on the back of it," and then later on, Sirius is talking about a different portrait, and he says, she'll have put another permanent sticking charm on the back of it. So I think
Okay.
there you have it.
Got
She
it.
being the actual human being, unless Wahlberga is unsticking herself, waddling with her frame over to a different thing, throwing this permanent sticking charm on it, and then waddling back, re-sticking herself and putting herself onto the wall.
Well, she can move through the portrait world into the other frame.
No,
and then
stop ruining my joke.
She's moving her portrait around Grimmauld Place to mess with Sirius's head.
Yes. Love it.
I've always been here. What are you talking about?
And as she says
I'm
it, she says,
watching
as
you.
she's waddling, she'll be like, just like the basilisk in the Chamber of Secret, I am wandering the halls, unbeknownst to the portraits
Unseen.
around me.
Oh my god.
Well, okay, this also brings me to, like, okay, they seem to use, like, the curtains over Wahlberga Black's
Yeah.
portrait to, like, put her to sleep, or like it's
Right,
hard
she's
for
a
them to
parrot.
close the curtains, but like once they close them, like she shuts up. So like, is that a magic that they created? Like, is this a well-known magic with portraits that like if you cover them, like they'll just fall asleep? Like, yeah, I don't know. Is that another way that?
I thought that this was Rowling kind of symbolizing the fact that portraits, all they can do is parrot other people. And so this was a clever way of being like, look, with birds, you put a blanket over them and they go to sleep because they think it's nighttime. And so with curtains, you do that. And this is, it's the kind of a play off of the fact that portraits are parroting other people.
This tied into my earlier thought of portraits being more like a 2D space. They're like a theatrical production.
Yeah. Curtain up, curtain
Yeah,
down.
so that the curtains go down, the people cease to exist.
Or like sort of it's within the coding of the portrait of like, if it's dark, go to sleep,
Yeah. That would be neat too.
There is an interesting, obviously we mostly see portraits around in the wizarding world. There is one particular tapestry, however, which is Barnabas the Barmy, who's the one that is across from the Room of Requirement. And it does seem almost like the tapestry behaves similarly to a painting, because it is moving to my understanding. Yeah, it's moving.
Training the trolls
Barnabas
for the
is
ballet.
there. He's teaching he's training the trolls for the ballet. So, but it doesn't seem to speak. And so I don't know if that's a difference between a tapestry versus a painting, or if that's just that Barnabas, as barmy as he was not a good enough wizard for his likeness to be able to interact.
As either Fred or George points out, speaking troll isn't hard. You just point and grunt. So maybe they're not speaking because all they're doing is pointing and grunting.
Maybe.
I wonder if it's also as you say, we talked about with photos, maybe it's an age of technology thing.
That's fascinating.
They made tapestries before they had worked out how to make paintings.
That's interesting.
Which also, in relation to the memory, given how old some of these things are, maybe it can't speak modern English. Because the English as she spoke back in the Founders' time would have been different to what they're speaking in the 1990s and when the books are set.
I mean, Sir Cadogan seems to do a good
That's
job
true.
of modern English, even though he was a knight during the medieval times.
That's true.
Yeah. So he's recent enough that he's been able to sort of keep up with it, but
Yeah, maybe he's like Don Quixote.
It could also be a
knights
choice.
in the 1800s. A choice, yeah. Just be quiet. I'm not speaking to anybody.
No, I meant like a choice to like continue learning the language or to just stick with what you speak.
or Sir Cadogan is more contemporary, but just like the imagery of a medieval knight.
Which I could see as well. But anyway, I think that's interesting. The only thing is like, so between Barnabas the Barmy and then Ariana Dumbledore's portrait and the Fat Lady's portrait, is they're all kind of like guardians of a passage, or like guardians of a location. And I just think it's interesting because they're almost like on a sliding scale of like how much they interact with the people around them. Because the Fat Lady's like giving out passwords and taking passwords and having conversations and throwing her shade on people leaving the portrait hole at certain times of night. And then you have Ariana, who doesn't speak, but that could just be our limited experience with her. But she like clearly understands everything that's going on, and she's able to like ferry Neville back over and everything. And then you have Barnabas, the barman, who's just kind of like in his own world.
Well, wasn't it said somewhere that Ariana didn't speak after her incident?
I think so.
I don't think
So
that
it
was
could just be
said.
that it's.
Or am I just misremembering that?
Was it not?
I don't remember that being in canon.
Or maybe just said she withdrew. But
Oh
not
yeah,
necessarily. I interpreted that as she didn't talk to anybody.
Yeah, I didn't interpret it that way.
Basically,
but,
it seemed in character for Ariana
Right.
to not speak. So
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I also just don't know if she was around long enough to train her portrait. And also, it feels like they made that portrait after she died.
Afterwards, probably.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because who's gonna? It doesn't seem like many portraits are made of a single person when they're 12.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, talking about all of these different portraits and their inhabitants brings us to the 7 ingredients of today's special.
Of all the notable portraits at Hogwarts, we've identified 7 of them for this very fudge the numbers until you make something 7 ingredients sort of dealio. So we have the 7 notable portraits at Hogwarts. Number 1, Phineas Nigellus Black. Number 2, Delius Derwent. Number 3, the Fat Lady. Number 4, Violet, and noted here by Sierra, the Fat Lady's friend. Number 5, Sir Cadogan. Number 6, my favorite name, Everard. Number 7, Professor Dippet. Missing, of course, would be the man who flipped off Fudge.
The unidentified headmaster. But that's the thing. 7 named notable portraits. It's all about the qualifications.
All about the qualifications. Not notable at all.
Except not Albus Dumbledore.
We only did the first 6 books.
We're ignoring Albus Dumbledore.
Because we weren't at Hogwarts in the 7th book. So.
Exactly.
Yeah.
7 ingredients of the first 6 books.
The 7 named notable portraits only.
Portraits.
We don't see their live companion except for Dibbit in a flashback.
In a memory.
That's different.
But it's only a memory.
It's not the
in
same.
a diary. It's not the same thing.
not the same.
We don't meet the living person.
Exactly.
There. We've made the qualifications happen.
Gotta be specific.
Keep squeezing, we can make it fit.
And on that note, it is time for our absent-minded raven, dear Matthew, to fly off to get whatever he needs for his day. A huge thanks for coming to visit us in the Three Broomstick. We always love hearing your wings flutter in, pick up a pint, and drink a bunch just like a magpie. So thanks for coming, Matthew. We really enjoyed having
Fly
you.
into a wall on the way out. I'm a small bird and we don't process alcohol well.
We try to make sure the glass is really dirty so you don't crash. It's all good. So really, a huge thanks for you being here, bud.
Thank you for having me.
Is there anything that you would like to plug or tell us where we should follow you?
Well, as I've said before, my socials are such as they are private, so I'll instead plug Laurie Kim's Harry Potter After 2020, which is another interesting podcast.
It is. Very much so. It's a really
Sounds
good listen.
good.
Friend of the show.
Indeed, friend of the show. And a huge thanks again to Laurie Young, who bought us this round of drinks at the Three Broomsticks. Thank you, Laurie.
Thank you. Woohoo.
Clap, 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 clap. If you, dear listener, would like to buy us the next round, head over to patreon.com/Three Broomsticks. That's with the numeral 3 to sign up. Patreon.com/Three Broomsticks. You can also help by rating and reviewing us. And if you like our show, don't forget to tell your friends. Word of mouth helps us hugely, and we always love to see these. Please don't forget to comment on the website or on our socials. That's where we get our comments that we get to read out. And if you happen to be like Absent-Minded Raven and be on the show, we'll let you read yours out while you are with us.
And if you want to connect with us on social media, please find us on
No, don't do social media. It's poisoning my generation.
How do you spell that?
Find us on Twitter, X, Instagram, or Facebook. Our assorted handles and our email address can be found in the episode description or on our website, which is 3broomstickspod.com. That's with 3 spelled out like a word, THREE. There's also any links to essays that we mentioned. You can submit topics there. You can let us know your thoughts. As Sam said, please just reach out. Scream back.
Yes, scream back.
Next time that we meet here at the Three Broomsticks, we will be discussing Sorcerer's Stone Chapter 14, Norwegian Ridgeback. Thanks so much for coming. I've been Sierra.
I'm Sophia.
I will be Sam. Thank you all for listening. See you next time in the Three Broomsticks. Cheers!
Give me big old buckets of butter beer. Give me big old barrels of butter beer. Give me the drink I love so dear. And another round for my friend right here. Give me big old buckets of butter beer. Give me big old barrels of butter beer. Give me the drink I love so dear. And another round for my friend right here. With the sweet old butter beer.
This episode of The Three Broomsticks was edited by Patrick Musilek. The theme song was written and performed by The Faithful Sidekicks. Make sure to check them out at thefaithfulsidekicks.com.
Dun, dun, dun.
Oh dear. Technical difficulties. Please wait. Insert Vivaldi here.
Whoa, that was a big burp. Sorry.
Someone got the hiccups there.
He's laughing in his sleep.
That's so cute.